Ossoff. Senator Hawley, you are now recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to the nominees. Thank you for being here. Mr. Hooks, I'd like to start with you, if I could. And I want to start by raising an issue that I have been talking about for 2 years now in this committee as it relates to FEMA, and that's the need for greater transparency in the FEMA process, particularly after there has been a disaster in the state, when it comes to awarding individual assistance, when it comes to working with local residents. I'm thinking in particular in my state, in the state of Missouri, in 2019, we had historic flooding, as you probably know about in the state. That was true of many Midwestern states. Historic flooding in my state. And unfortunately, we had many residents who were, of course, out of their homes. They were out of their businesses, off their farms in this case. This was in northern and central Missouri. And their experience with FEMA was not a pleasant one. They couldn't figure out what the rules were. They couldn't figure out who to talk to. We had residents who were awarded assistance and then had it retracted from them while they're still out of their homes. They said, here you do qualify. Here's the assistance. Oh, wait, no, give it back to us. You don't actually qualify. This is totally unacceptable. And at a minimum, FEMA needs to commit to being more transparent, needs to commit to doing a better job on the ground and informing residents in disaster areas what assistance is available, what FEMA can do to help them, who the contacts are, and where they can get information. Then, of course, to make sure that when assistance is needed, it gets to the people who need it, and it's not then withdrawn, the rug isn't pulled out from under them. So, can you commit to me that you will work with me, if you're confirmed, on these transparency issues, on these informational issues for my constituents in the state of Missouri, but for that matter, for everybody who needs it everywhere FEMA serves?
Yes, sir. Senator Hawley, thank you for the question and raising the concern. I certainly can commit, if confirmed, to work with you and any other senator on the challenges that you face. FEMA has as a stated goal to reduce the complexity of FEMA, and I believe that as FEMA does that, and I look forward, if confirmed, to get a greater understanding about what progress they have made to do that, that we can ultimately reduce any situation where we find ourselves having to claw back money, because after somebody has been victimized by a storm and we've met them on their worst day, we don't want to contribute to the angst that they already have.
Thanks for that answer. What steps do you envision taking to make FEMA and the FEMA process, particularly as it relates to assistance, less complex, more transparent, more upfront for those who are desperately in need? Well,
again, thank you. One of the most overriding things that comes to my mind right now is that, and I'm sure this process is ongoing already with Administrator Criswell there in advance of me, is to review the programs. I think that any program should not just stand in and of itself. There should be a constant review and constant process of improvement to both see whether or not we're meeting the congressional intent and whether or not we are meeting the needs of those individuals that it is designed to serve. And then I would also lean in heavily to look at what the capacity and capability FEMA has to be on the ground to ensure that there's a great understanding as to how these programs are to be rolled out, that connection with the state is extremely important. The state has an extremely important role as far as understanding those local communities, and FEMA has to understand the impact that storms and floods have on those local members in that community, so that we can understand that they may not have documentation readily available, and that we can help them navigate through technical assistance and perhaps FEMA integration teams to help them navigate sometimes what is very complex issues.
Good, very good. Thank you for that. Let me ask you this. Will you commit, if you are confirmed, to making sure that you do everything within your power to see that FEMA's resources and its aid is distributed strictly on the basis of need, that it goes to those who need it, that it goes to those who are in danger or who are out of their homes or otherwise qualify for it, and that it's not distributed based on any other factor? Can you commit to that?
Sir, I certainly can commit to ensure that any programs that I am responsible for or responsible for having input to are addressed equitably and meet the congressional intent. So, yes, sir.
Good. Well, I raised this issue because the Senate has considered substantial legislation recently in which my friends on the other side of the aisle have tried to impose what they call equity requirements on the distribution of government funds, sometimes on the basis of race or other categories that, frankly, are treated under federal law, where our federal law and our federal Constitution says you cannot target aid on the basis of race. You cannot target aid on the basis of gender. It's supposed to be done on the basis of need. It's supposed to be done on the basis of race-neutral, race-gender terms. I mean, that's been our constitutional law for many years, and I'm frankly worried about a situation in which we see FEMA giving resources on pursuing some sort of social agenda when people in my state, whatever their racial background, wherever they are geographically in my state, whether they're in urban areas or rural areas or the middle of the state or the north of the state, I don't care where, but if they're in need, I want to make sure that FEMA is responsive to them, that FEMA is working with them, and that FEMA is not distracted by some other agenda that doesn't actually have something to do with helping people who are in the midst of a disaster. So can you commit to me that you'll help FEMA keep focused on its mission to help those, particularly in the midst of a disaster, to get the aid that they need and get the response that they need wherever they live, whatever their background is, whatever their personal circumstances may be?
Thank you, Senator. I can commit to work tirelessly to ensure that all FEMA programs reach the intended recipients as specified by law.
Very good. Let me, Mr. Kubayanda, let me turn to you here just briefly in the time that we have remaining. I want to raise an issue that's important to me about Postal Service in rural communities. My state has many, many rural communities, the state of Missouri. I grew up in a rural community. It's important to me that we make sure that the Postal Service continues to fulfill its mission to deliver the mail to those rural communities, to make sure that the lifeline that the Postal Service represents to those rural communities. And by the way, again, that's in my state, that's north, south, east, and west. We've got rural communities all over the state. In every area of the state, and I want to make sure that the Postal Service continues to provide the services that those communities rely on. So let me ask you specifically about what I think is an important piece of legislation that I'm proud to co-sponsor with the chairman, which is the Postal Service Reform Act. I think it's important, and this act would help to make sure that we secure 6-day service, protect rural delivery, and ensure that every American, including those in rural communities, have reliable and uninterrupted access to the mail. I wonder if you've had an opportunity to review this legislation and if you support it.
I am familiar with the legislation, and I think it would be a very positive step. It's long overdue, frankly, and I think it would be a step forward. I'm a former resident of both Joplin and St. Louis as a child, and so I'm familiar with a lot of those issues in rural Missouri myself, and I think it's critical that I think this legislation will help advance the ball in terms of addressing those issues.
Good. Thank you very much for that. My time's expired. I might have another question or two for you in this vein, but I appreciate that. Thanks to all of you for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley.